NHS staff and patients have the right to provide and receive treatment in a safe environment. Nuisance and disturbance behaviour diverts attention away from the job of providing this care. Powers of removal, as described in the legislation, should be used as the last resort, and conflict resolution techniques should be applied as much as possible. Nick Martin leads the Area Security Management Specialists for NHS Protect. So Nick, how would you define nuisance and disturbance behaviour?
Well, nuisance can be defined as a person or thing that causes inconvenience or annoyance. Disturbance is where the peace is broken down.
What sort of examples are we looking at here?
Well, the examples could be using foul language, verbal abuse, smoking perhaps out or on premises, and creating excessive noise.
One of the things that we've been talking about is how this affects, obviously, staff at the front line. And I mean, what does it mean when you're sort of getting in the way of staff doing their job?
Well, impeding them from performing their duties, blocking thoroughfares, and basically generally stopping them from getting on with their day-to-day operation.
So that could be physically blocking as well as verbally sort of intimidating?
Yes, yeah.
So would something like smoking in the building be covered by that definition?
Well, smoking is one of those activities really that obviously isn't allowed on most NHS premises these days, and yes, it is one of those particular things that could be perceived as causing annoyance or inconvenience to members of staff, patients and visitors.
Now, what about physical assault and violence towards NHS staff?
Well, I'd like to make it clear that physical assault isn't covered by CJIA. Effectively, there are elements of current legislation that deal with that as criminal offences, so that's not covered. Are
there many instances of this kind of behaviour taking place?
It's fairly regular. It's something that most NHS staff have to put up with on a regular basis. It's something that takes time away from them as well to give the highest standard of care. And yes, it's something that's quite regular and well known.
Because again, it's the knock-on effect, isn't it, as well with frontline staff, affecting maybe not just then for that shift, but ongoing shifts as well.
Absolutely, and again, it's something that takes a lot of time away from NHS staff to deal with the complaints, deal with the actual intimidation and annoyance at the scene, and also it makes things very uncomfortable for other patients and visitors.
This legislation now. How is that going to help, really, frontline staff?
It gives NHS staff a legal framework to act within, power to remove and authorise removal, which the common law civil trespass doesn't actually do. There is a potential for an issue where they decide to remove someone outside of the CJIA framework, if you like, that could mean that the NHS staff could be liable to potential prosecution themselves even for assault or other offences. This actually gives them a proper process with regards to removal and even potential prosecution.
Are you hoping this is going to act as a deterrent?
Yes, it's something that most certainly will need to be used more, I feel, especially because civil trespass, for example, is something that really would potentially require police involvement, but CJIA, for obvious reasons, gives that power to the NHS and has that prosecution element that sits on the end of it, if it's required, that will act as a deterrent.
Now, presumably, it's not sort of straightforward to apply to all NHS buildings and facilities.
Well, many NHS trusts successfully apply criminal trespass, but CJIA was brought in because of the difficulty, really, I think, in actually deciding when someone is trespassing on NHS premises. We're open 365 days a year, 24 hours a day.
So, the legislation gives NHS staff members a legal framework to act within when they're dealing with nuisance or disturbance behaviour, and the power to remove or authorise the removal of those people and potentially prosecute them. Dealing with nuisance and disturbance behaviour can take precious time away from staff, and the incidents can escalate to become more serious. While NHS staff should always use conflict resolution techniques as much as possible, it's good to have an additional tool in your armoury.